Come with me into this Victorian cemetery and explore its vampire legends. Welcome to Duke Street Cemetery in Southport, England. Now, this very old Victorian boneyard is absolutely full of not only ghost stories, but also the legend of a vampire. So, I brought you here today to explore some of these legends and tell you the story as I walk you round the old graves. So, let's get to it. You'll find this old cemetery down the aptly named Cemetery Road in Southport. It has been there since the late 1800s and some of the tombstones are marvellously gothic. But with its long history comes a number of ghost tales, hauntings, and even a vampire legend. So let's get to it. So the first story I'm going to tell you from here, and perhaps the cemetery's most famous ghost, is that of the Black Lady. More of your classic style apparition. So this comes from a woman who was only about 15 at the time and lives in the far houses just at the front of where I'm walking now. So she says she couldn't help at night, watching out of her bedroom window at the cemetery and what was going on inside. Anyway, she says she starts to see, after dark, the silhouette of this woman in a black dress and black veil walking amongst the tombstones. Now, this woman had an unearthly presence about her, and she says even at that age she knew it was likely a ghost. Anyway, on one occasion, she's woken in the night what sounds like whispering in her bedroom. Wakes up, there's nobody there. She then goes to the bedroom window and peeps out, and there, just at the foot of her garden but still in the actual cemetery grounds, is the woman in black, looking up as she's pulled her veil. She said her face was a deathly pale white, her eyes are sunken black, and she simply stared, tilting her head as she watched. Ever since she knew that the ghost had physically seen her too, she claims terrible nightmares followed. Now, this would be nightmares of her in what felt like a balcony on maybe a third or fourth floor, pretty high up anyway. She would then be pushed from behind, fall over the balcony, and just before her body would crash to the bottom, she'd sharply awaken up. Now, even to this day, she remembers the dreams quite vividly, and does feel as though the ghostly woman in black was trying to show her how she died. She hasn't been able to trace who this lady was, but perhaps it's an unsolved murder, and that's why she wanted to appear in the dreams of how she passed away. Who really knows, but it's a fascinating legend, and I can't help but wonder sometimes as I wander around this cemetery, maybe the woman in black's still here. Maybe you'll see her, who knows. Ooh, spooky stuff. Now get ready for this next ghost story that takes place in the 1980s. A 19-year-old man named Jack was walking home from work one evening, taking the path past Duke Street Cemetery. As he passed the gates, he seen a young girl aged about 9, screaming, "Please, please help me! My sister, she's fallen over, she's injured." Naturally, he follows the child into the graveyard and is led to a woman laying unconscious in front of a grave. She appears to be around the age of 45, and he thinks to himself, "That was your sister?" Regardless, he shakes her awake, checks on her, then goes on to explain the child is now missing. Your sister, was it?" The woman exchanges a rather puzzled look. My sister passed away in 1953, she says, pointing to the grave. The woman is then adamant the ghost of her little sister has come back to save her. Eventually, Jack walks away, leaving the woman in floods of tears at the graveside. But as he gets to the cemetery gates, he hears a voice whisper down his ear, "Thank you." Ooh, spooky stuff, eh? That was told to me by Jack firsthand, and prior to this experience, he was never ever one to believe in ghosts or the paranormal, which makes this all the more interesting, for he knew he seen the full apparition of a little girl as clear as me and you, and then proceeded to hear her voice. I think that one's quite nice in a way, almost like your deceased relative is still watching over you from beyond the grave. Some spooky goings on, eh? So the second story I want to tell you from here is one that I feel being lost to history, but absolutely fascinating nonetheless. This story involves that of an alleged vampire. So, it all started when neighbourhood cats and dogs were being found dead in the cemetery grounds. It was said they had been almost completely drained of blood, and naturally being here in England, and I'm pretty sure most parts of the world, there's not many predators that can do that to an animal. As this started to get more well known in the community, there were sightings by people of this alleged vampiric creature. The first one was an Edith Meadows. Now, she was walking her dog through the cemetery grounds at night. She says over this section here that I'm about to show you with this angel. Here we go. She says from behind this tombstone, she sees a very pallid, thin man in black with no hair and appeared to be in very dated clothing even for that period. And he's watching her from behind the tombstones. She can see quite clearly that he's there. But he thinks he's being well hidden. Anyway, this man starts to creep up from behind, the woman now fearing for her life with these legends fresh in her head of these animals. He sneaks up behind, she snaps and turns round and almost has a heart attack at his ghastly face. He opens his mouth to reveal a set of pointed fangs. The woman ran screaming into the night. Some local residents came out, soon found her, and she was okay, and relayed their story to the community, which began to grow and grow, and this vampire legend was soon born. Around a period of about 15 years after this, the vampire legend was still going strong. People still claimed to have seen the creature roaming around here, and many believed that it lived in this chapel here. Well, in the basement of this chapel anyway. It was in use back in the day there. So much so that local people actually stopped going to church for this very reason. Spooky stuff, eh? But why this old chapel? Well, I'll tell you. So, I'll take you back to a stormy night in 1943. A young girl was passing the cemetery gates and claims the vampire's hands reached through and tried to snatch her through the bars. Her screams alerted some men, 2 local blacksmiths, who grabbed their spades, jumped the cemetery walls, and were adamant they were going to slay the blood-sucking creature. Catching sight of the men, the vampire ran into the overgrowth. But it didn't seem to be running away out of fear, for the creature was cackling loudly, the most sinister laugh the men had ever heard, and surely unholy. The creature then ran to the chapel, gripping one of the heavy stone slabs, moving it out of the way and climbing inside of the hole. The men were completely astonished, for the creature was very thin and looked like it had been dead for a number of weeks already. Naturally terrified by this point, they did still chase the creature, for they had to protect the women in their community. So, both men together tried to move this stone slab entrance to the chapel. However, neither of them had the physical strength to do so. Eventually, the men admitted defeat, and after shouting expletives at the creature and warning that it would be killed should it show its face again, they made their way home. But it seems to have set its sights on that young girl, and that night appeared at her bedroom window, gently tapping on her glass. "Mom! Dad!" she screamed, and the creature snuck off into the shadows. The final sighting of the vampire was a few weeks later. The priest was in his kitchen cooking tea after a long day of mass. He noticed somebody was watching him through the window, but every time he would go up to look through the glass, the figure would vanish into the bushes. Eventually, he grabbed one of his lit candles, opened the window and peered outside, trying to shine the light of the flame against the bushes. However, the flame illuminated a ghastly face staring back at him. It was that of the vampire. "In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, be gone," said the priest, and with that he grabbed his old crucifix sitting on the kitchen worktop, pressing it right into the bushes and trying to hit the vampire on the head. This ghastly creature of the night let out a howl which sent shivers down the priest's back, but he watched it as it ran away into the night. For this creature could not escape the power of God. Stories of the vampire began to die down after this, but exploring this old cemetery, I wanted to bring the story back to life for you all. I mean, who really knows what lurks after dark? Even if you do see this as just a simple old folk tale, well, it's still just as fascinating for me. I love the fact that these areas that can be rather unassuming have these fantastic legends attached, and it's my job here to share them with you all and bring them back to the modern day. Now, there's another spooky fact about this cemetery, not necessarily another ghost story, but equally as ghastly, and you'll see exactly why. So, around the time this cemetery was being built, many people were dying of common diseases, in fact rather frequently. So frequently that the council of the time could not keep up with the demand of burials. This resulted in local folk being buried in more shallow graves, which is all well and good until you get the heavy rainfall, which naturally comes in northwest England, as many of you watching probably know. As the heavy rain showers began to pour down, with it they washed away a lot of the surface mud. Yep, you guessed it. This began to uncover the recently deceased. Not only would you find their coffins exposed, but some of the coffins, being cheap woods, had already suffered to the elements, meaning locals visiting the graveyard would see the bodies of the recently deceased protruding from the ground. With stories like this up in the air, it's no wonder this cemetery is supposed to be haunted. Okay, so this is the final gravestone I wanted to show you today. The woman buried here was known in the local community to be a bit of a witch, but by the point in which she lived, it wasn't a capital offence anymore, and she was actually quite welcomed by the community. However, nobody dared get on the wrong side of her, for it was said if you did, she could equally dish out curses as she could medicines. Now, I thought it quite a cool grave to point out to you while I'm here, and it took me a little while to find it, but how pretty. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please hit the subscribe button.